Let's now look at the newsy, featurey bit of the show here on the Good Morning Portugal radio show and podcast for expats and explorers in Portugal. Lovely long article. So I won't read all of it, but I will commend you to go look for yourself after I've tickled your taste buds, because it's about bread, it's about food, and it is the Beyond Lisbon Experience Portugal Beyond Lisbon blog written by Catia Lima. And it starts, the title is Portuguese Bread and a Little Rant. And I want to include that, Katia's rant about travel. Well, people who consider themselves travel writers, I suppose, is what she's getting at. But it begins with a lovely Anthony Bourdain quote: "Travel is not reward for working, it's education for living," which is a lovely take on it, isn't it? And thank you to the dearly departed Anthony for leaving such inspiring words and a legacy of work and his view on global cultures and coming from a food point of view, obviously. And Catia begins this article. "Some days ago, I ranted a bit on Facebook and Instagram because of the insane amount of tourists today who are worried, mostly, with collecting stamps on their passports and taking selfies for the gram. You know what I mean. Years ago, I stopped reading travel blogs except for a select few because of how most of them just seemed to have a checklist of places to visit, but apparently didn't really reap any real life or life-enriching benefit from all that traveling." I can see what she's getting at here. As someone who, especially as a kid, has traveled a lot in my own country, I felt this view was shallow, to say the least. Recently, on a Facebook travel group, there was a guy advising readers not to drink port wine because it, to quote, is not tasty. These are his own words. And saying that people in Portugal can't make a proper cappuccino. That's a red rag to a Portuguese ball. "I almost went postal," she says, not because he was making negative comments, but because of how his comments showed that to him, his experience of the world was the right one. Mind you, I don't even know where he was from. I would take a guess, but I don't want to offend any cultures myself right now. It's okay if you don't like port, but saying it isn't good when it sells so much and to so many countries, honestly. I'm Portuguese and I don't like sardines. This is what Catia is saying. But that doesn't mean I'll tell other people it sucks, don't eat it. I remember when I arrived in Hamburg years ago and my host asked me if I wanted a coffee. I thought that having an espresso would be lovely and quickly said yes. When he brought me a big cup of coffee, I had a moment. Being Portuguese, I naturally assumed it would be an espresso. But that's not the kind of coffee Germans usually drink. You see my point? Oh, and the cappuccino? Well, Portuguese usually drink either a bica or a cimbalinho, an espresso coffee, or that much coffee with hot milk called a mer de leite, which is my favorite, if it's in a cup, or a galao if it's in a glass. And the galao looks more like this is me talking now, not Catia, and this is me probably making mistakes about the culture, but I'm going to have a go. It never stopped me. Mer de leite, half milk, literally. And it's a bit, in UK, it's a bit like the coffee that continental cafes used to serve with steamed milk and like a frothy coffee, I suppose you'd call it. It's more like that than a cappuccino, and I prefer it, rightly so. Mer de leite if it's in a cup, galao if it's in a glass. Galao looks, because it's in a glass, more like a latte. It's not a latte, but it looks more like one, and it strikes me as being a bit milkier. I don't know, or longer anyway, so more milk. Cappuccino is something that started showing up only a few years ago because of the tourists here. In some places, they don't even know how to prepare it because, you guessed it, nobody drinks it. So there you go. This whole thing happened, continues Catia, around the date when Anthony Bourdain would have, should I say Bourdain or Bourdain, would have celebrated another birthday. The stars were aligned, it seemed, and I swear I could almost see his ghost giving me a smile and a thumbs up. It was the final push I needed. Yes, Catia. So here's the deal. I'll be sharing with you my tips on some Portuguese foods, traditional or otherwise. Why? Because I was born in Portugal. I've always lived in Portugal. I've traveled a lot in Portugal. I love eating Portuguese food. My mum and grandma cook some mean Portuguese food. I'd love to meet your mum and your grandma. I suppose that makes me entitled to say a thing or two about the subject. Absolutely, Catia. For what it's worth, you have my blessing and encouragement. The point is to give you an idea of what to expect concerning specific Portuguese foods. So, first things first, anything that has chocolate, gelatine, sweet condensed milk, whipped cream or cookies is not traditional. Now, I didn't know that. If not for you, Catia, I would have no idea. That, to me, I would say was traditional Portuguese baking or cake making or sweets. But it's very interesting to hear that. These ingredients weren't widely available in Portuguese homes before the late 1970s, early 1980s. They were known and used, but not by most families. Besides, people didn't eat as many sweet things as they do today. I'm sure that's true. That means a lot of desserts like serradura, baba de camelo, is that baby camel? Salama de chocolate or bolo de bolocha are not traditional. Very interesting. What should be the subject of the first of these posts then? Bread, of course. We love bread and have many different types of bread. And this is where I think you should check out the article yourself, the blog post. And it is Catia's Beyond Lisbon Guide to Portuguese Bread. And a couple of things I want to say, and it is my word of the day, so we'll kind of mix that in here. Yeah, I found, I was walking through the supermarket yesterday, grabbing a few things, and my son saw some red bread, and I'd never seen that before here, and I ordered, I don't know, half a dozen red bread rolls, and very interesting they are too. Red bread, never seen that before, and it doesn't appear, this is the thing, it's a bit like a guide to Portuguese coffee. There are so many, and you'll see some coffees in some guides and not in others. And it's obviously regional and the tastes of the person writing the article and that sort of thing. But red bread, that's one. I need to ask Catia about that. But I will give you the headlines of the different types of bread just to give you an idea. Broa, which is the made of corn. So that has a really kind of, it's quite an interesting and serious experience. That's a serious bread. It's heavy and dense. And it's made of with corn flour, brau de milho, corn flour. Then there's pão alentejano, obviously originating from the Alentejo area. There is pão de mafra, another regional bread, obviously. Then she says that papo seco, and caracasa, viana / vianinha, and bolo / bolinha, and bola de agua. These are the most common types of bread you're likely to find in bakeries, cafes, and restaurants. They're fluffy with a slightly crispy crust and some air pockets inside. And this is the sort of bread you'll get. This is me talking again, not Catia, but this is the sort of bread you'll get as you sit down and look at the menu and have a drink, and the bread with maybe some fish paste and some olives. That's the sort of bread I think you get in the restaurant, at the beginning of your meal. I had a lovely meal in next to Time Out Market, and they brought a little bread roll, which was a sourdough, and it was a little roll, and it had the caricature pictures. The picture of it is actually on the Good Morning Portugal Instagram account, on the gram, as Catia was saying earlier on. And it's there's the Master Chef guy, the Portuguese Master Chef guy on there, and it was really nice. It was I think it was meant to be from one of the oldest sourdough mothers. Is that what you call them? The original, starter dough. And it was great to have a sourdough little bread roll, and it came in a little paper bag, which is very nice in the presentation, with a little story on the outside of the bag. But that, I think, as well, is a nod to tradition here, because I think in the old days you get bread in a little sack, and we live in an old pension, a guest house, that had quite a lot of the trimmings left here from the old days, and the fixtures and fittings. And there are some beautiful old cotton bags that presumably the warm bread would come in a little cotton bag, drawstring bag, and you'd open it up, and that would be a lovely start to your meal. So how lovely is that? There is pão de centeio, rye bread. There is pão com chorizo, which is really, I'd never seen that before until I came into Portugal. But that's chorizo sausage folded in to, it's like the sausage roll, I suppose, of Portugal, but it's chorizo folded into the bread roll. And it feels like the sort of thing you might have, if you're working in the fields and you've got a ready-made sort of sandwich there. There is bolo de cacao, which is from Madeira. There is pão de leite, which is probably more milk in it than there is water in it, I'm guessing. Fluffy type of bread roll, a little bit sweet. And the dough includes milk, of course, from which it gets the name milk bread. Very popular choice with children, as you might understand. And bolo levedo from the Azores. And finally, pão de Deus, God's bread. I think that would mean, right? Another mix of bread and cake. So you can see that, there's a bread end of the spectrum and a cake end of the spectrum and everything in between. I'll just finish by adding the last paragraph or two, because it's really, I love Catia's writing. It's very, very educational and very enjoyable to read, and obviously telling you a lot about Portuguese culture. So where can you buy bread in Portugal? Besides the most obvious choice, the bakery, padaria is the word you need for that, padaria. You can also buy bread in some cafes and in supermarkets, with the bigger shops usually having a large selection to choose from. If, however, and this is key, if, however, you have a bakery near you, I strongly suggest you buy your bread there, because being a regular customer in a Portuguese bakery is something of an experience in itself. And I have to say, yes, absolutely right. Back in the day, when everyone in towns and cities went to their local padaria every day, people always took their saco de pan. That's just the thing I was talking about, a.k.a. the talego or the talego, a cloth bag. And she includes two beautiful illustrations, pictures of these saco de pau. Two examples there. A fancy crocheted one. These are wicked vintage things that could quite easily make a hipster comeback in Portugal. And a more simple cotton printed bag. She says simple, but it's got a lovely illustration, rustic, bucolic idyll of bread represented on there. Do you like Portuguese bread, she says? And if so, do you have a favourite? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Go tell her. Tell her what your favourite Portuguese bread is and ask her any question about Portuguese culture, because I'm sure she'd be delighted to help. At Beyond Lisbon on Twitter. She's on there if you like your information in short bursts, which will lead you to her Beyond Lisbon, all one phrase, .wordpress.com blog. Thank you very much, Catia.